Americans share hopes and goals and values far more important than any political disagreements. Republicans want the best for our nation, and so do Democrats. Our votes may differ, but not our hopes.
Good morning. Finally, a president-elect. George W. Bush will become the 43rd president of the United States. The transition begins in earnest today, Thursday, December 14th, 2000.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer. Live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on this Thursday morning. I'm Matt Lauer.
And I'm Katie Couric. 37 days after Americans went to the polls, and now we have a winner. Now it can be said, President-elect Bush.
He is the first son to follow his father to the presidency since the Adamses. The first president, by the way, since 1888 to have lost the popular vote and still win the White House. Bush and the current vice president, Al Gore, spoke to the nation last night after Gore formally conceded in a telephone call. Now, this morning, just a few minutes ago in London, the current president offered these words, first on Al Gore.
He spoke for all of us last night, and he did it eloquently and well. And President-elect Bush responded with generosity and kind, I thought, in his remarks. And I think we ought to use this opportunity to let the country come together and try to get the new administration off to a good start.
That was President Clinton speaking this morning in London.
The two speeches last night were the first steps in trying to heal a divided country. And an NBC News Reuters poll out this morning finds that the country is still split over all of this. Many wonder whether the weeks of courtroom wrangling have sown doubts about Mr. Bush's legitimacy. Here's what we found. 59% of the people we spoke with said Bush's presidency is legitimate. 37% said it is not. But when we asked whether the country will come together, 50% said no, 46% said yes. And when we asked about this week's U.S. Supreme Court decision that ultimately ended this drama, 48% said it was politically motivated. 43% said it was objective. Matt?
Katie, we're going to look at last night's speeches from every angle, also look at what's ahead. Let's begin with the man who's covering President-elect Bush. That's NBC's David Gregory, who's in Austin, Texas this morning. David, good morning to you.
Matt, good morning. His mandate in doubt, President-elect Bush seeks to overcome the bitterness of this contested election by reaching out to Al Gore and to a nation, he says, invoking Lincoln, must now rise above a house divided.
My friend, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush.
It was intended to be a deeply symbolic speech. Bush, the eldest son of a president, before hundreds of supporters in the Texas Capitol, introduced by the state's House Speaker, a Democrat, a signal to a weary country that it's time for consensus.
I know America wants reconciliation and unity. I know Americans want progress, and we must seize this moment and deliver. I was not elected to serve one party, but to serve one nation.
Calling the past 5 weeks a, quote, long and trying period, Bush praised the vice president for his service and convictions. Recalling Gore's concession phone call, which came just 8 minutes before the vice president's address, Bush said they agreed to meet next Tuesday in Washington.
And I thank him for a call that I know was difficult to make.
Promising diligent work on his core agenda, education improvement, Social Security and Medicare reform, and tax cuts, Bush touted his compassionate conservative philosophy.
Together we will address some of society's deepest problems, one person at a time, by encouraging and empowering the good hearts and good works of the American people.
But Bush also appeared humble, mindful of the fact that while he prevailed in the closest election in more than a century, he lost the popular vote.
Whether you voted for me or not, I will do my best to serve your interests, and I will work to earn your respect.
Cheered by supporters in Austin, Bush also received congratulations from foreign leaders, including British Prime Minister Blair, who sympathized in a message to Bush, quote, "It was a long and agonizing wait for you." But now the wait is over. The country's 43rd president, aides say, will resign as Texas governor within days and work quickly to appoint a cabinet now just 36 days before his inauguration. Aides say Bush will begin his first full day as president-elect in church. And they also say that he is expected to name his top White House staff positions by as early now as tomorrow. And later today in Washington, the government is expected to officially turn over $5.3 million in transition funds and those long-awaited keys to the new administration's temporary offices in Washington. Matt?
That's right, David. They were a bone of contention. David Gregory in Austin, Texas this morning. Thank you very much. Let's bring our Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press in, Tim Russert. Tim, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
We talked about tone yesterday. We talked about how important tone was in this speech. He wasn't gloating. He didn't celebrate a lot. Compassionate, reconciliation. What'd you think?
Actually, a bit humble, very earnest, very sincere, and I dare say presidential. Matt, I thought the most important line in this speech was, "I will work to earn your respect." George W. Bush knows that this is an exceedingly uphill struggle for him to achieve the presidency. He does not have a mandate. The Senate is deadlocked between Democrats and Republicans. He has a bare majority in the House. It is going to have to be a centrist, moderate agenda in order for him to achieve anything. He must reach out. That's what he tried to do last night.
You talked about the line you liked. What about this line? Republicans want what's best for America, and then the long pause, and so do Democrats.
He referred to the election of 1800 when John Adams turned over power to Thomas Jefferson, the first peaceful transformation of power in our country's history. And Jefferson at that time said, "We are all Federalists, we are all Republicans," the two major parties at the time. That's what George Bush was trying to do last night. Democrats and Republicans come together. We really have to pull together if we're going to achieve anything.
What do you think about his comments on Al Gore?
I thought they were very gracious and I think somewhat empathetic as to what Al Gore was going through. You know, in the end, these are two grudging gladiators who have enormous respect for each other because only the two of them have experienced the same emotions during the last 35 days.
Well, let's talk for a quick second about performance, not content. They brought him into the Texas Capitol where he had a live audience. So he got to look around the room and address individuals in that audience, which took him away from what we talked about before, that deer in the headlights look of his last address to the nation.
Such an important point. His swagger was gone. He did have a human emotional connection. He was in a Democratic House, introduced by a Democrat, alluded to the late former Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock, a Democrat. I thought the setting and tone were perfect, Matt, because George W. Bush realizes that he cannot govern with a far-right agenda. He's going to have to govern from the center, and last night personified that. And also, Matt, he has to connect with people on a regular basis and not talk above them. He also demonstrated that last night.
All right, Tim, thanks very much. Sit tight. We're going to talk to you more in this half hour, but right now at 8 past the hour, here's Katie.
Matt, thank you. Vice President Gore also called for unity in his concession speech last night. NBC's Claire Shipman is in Washington with more on that speech. Claire, good morning.
Good morning, Katie. You know, Gore wrote most of this speech himself, and his friends and aides say that from the very beginning, he knew what he wanted to say. One friend explained that Gore understood he had a higher bar than most people to make the case he's not a sore loser, that he can be a good loser. He was determined to be generous, not grudging. For example, very pointedly ignoring the advice of some frustrated Democrats that he not use the word concession. An emotional moment, and one Al Gore fought to avoid for 5 weeks. But with his family and the Liebermans by his side, he offered a heartfelt and magnanimous admission of defeat. The emphasis, healing the nation and good wishes for the president-elect.
I personally will be at his disposal, and I call on all Americans. I particularly urge all who stood with us to unite behind our next president. This is America. Just as we fight hard when the stakes are high, we close ranks and come together when the contest is done.
He even joked about his now famous retracted concession on election night.
Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd president of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time.
But Gore pointedly admitted to some frustration, even as he formally conceded.
Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be no doubt. While I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. I accept the finality of this outcome, which will be ratified next Monday in the Electoral College. And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession.
There were moments of candor almost unparalleled for the usually restrained vice president. The pain of failing to carry his home state, for example.
As for what I'll do next, I don't know the answer to that one yet. Like many of you, I'm looking forward to spending the holidays with family and old friends. I know I'll spend time in Tennessee and mend some fences, literally and figuratively.
And those who know Gore well say this is a hint that he's sure to try again in 4 years.
Some have asked whether I have any regrets. And I do have one regret, that I didn't get the chance to stay and fight for the American people over the next 4 years, especially for those who need burdens lifted and barriers removed, especially for those who feel their voices have not been heard. I heard you, and I will not forget.
After the speech, throngs of White House staffers stood waiting to cushion his defeat, and Gore set off for home amid their cheers. And Katie, he came home to a party here at his residence that lasted to the wee hours of the morning. Campaign workers, guests like labor leader John Sweeney, singer John Bon Jovi. From my reporting, Gore was last seen holding onto a bottle of beer, dancing with his wife. Then Tipper was later playing the drums. I'm also told that the Gore family is going to try to get away for a long weekend this weekend, and they're looking for some privacy. So far, they're not telling anyone where they're going, Katie.
All right, Claire Shipman. Claire, thank you very much. Let's check in again with Tim Russert. Tim, it seems to me that Al Gore had to really accomplish 3 things. He had to be magnanimous. He had to express some kind of displeasure with the Supreme Court decision. At least he had to have some kind of response. And he obviously kept the door open for 2004. Do you think he achieved all those things?
3 for 3. He was gracious and credible, Katie. He said he disagreed with the court. He said he was disappointed about losing. He said he was going to go back home and mend fences. All those things are exactly the right tone. People would not have believed him if he said, you know, this doesn't bother me. Congratulations to the winner. Quite the opposite. Al Gore believes very deeply he won this election. I was quite taken by his first phrase, Katie. I congratulate Governor Bush on becoming the president, not winning the election. I thought that was quite striking.
Do you think you're reading too much into that, Tim, or do you think that was a deliberate choice of words?
Oh, I think it was very deliberate, but does not detract in any way from the extraordinary, magnanimous and gracious speech that Al Gore gave. I thought it was perhaps the best of his career.
Let's talk about his political future. You know, he did say, I will not forget, my only regret that I will not be able to fight for you. Clearly, you got the sense that he was saying, I'll be back. The question is that realistic? Will he be back, Tim?
Well, you know, on election night, if he had lost a clear-cut loss, defeat, most people would have written him off saying, how could a vice president in these economic times lose a race like this? But because of the last 5 weeks and the way he lost, one Gore advisor said, we much prefer to lose by the Supreme Court decision than by a recount, because it will linger in people's minds whether or not we really had won the election. The leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Tom Daschle, leader of the Democrats in the House, Dick Gebhardt, have both said that Al Gore is the leading contender in 2004. I think he'll be challenged. I think, in his words, he'll have to fight for it, but he certainly is very much in the running.
And finally, I know that you and Matt talked about style over substance with George W. Bush. Style-wise, how do you think Al Gore did? He seemed more relaxed than usual and more conversational.
Perfect word. Is the most conversational, self-deprecating speech I've ever heard him give. It's much more like the Al Gore you meet in an informal setting than you have seen on the campaign stump. I think that he did the country an enormous amount of good, and I think he helped himself politically as well.
All right, Tim, thank you so much.
Thanks,
We're going to be
Katie.
talking with you again in a few minutes. It's 7:14. Once again, here's Matt.
Katie, thank you. The question now is, how will a divided Congress function with George W. Bush? Congressman David Bonnier is the House Democratic Whip, a member of the Democratic leadership. Congressman Bonnier, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you, Matt?
I'm fine, thanks. I know you watched both speeches. Did these guys do enough to put this election controversy behind us?
Well, let's say that they've reached out to each other and they've tried to bind the heels of the country. And I think Tim's comments about the vice president's speech, where he actually stole every word that I was going to use with respect to the speech itself. It was generous, it was conciliatory, it was self-deprecating in a humorous way, and it was very poignant. I was moved deeply by the vice president's thoughts about his regrets not being able to fight for people who need to be stood up for.
But you stopped short a second ago of saying this puts the election mess behind us.
Well, I want to say something about the speech by the governor, too, because I thought it was also reaching out. I thought the tone was good. I thought he did express a sense of humility.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer. Live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today on this Friday morning. I'm Katie Couric.
And I'm Matt Lauer. It seems Governor Bush, or President-elect Bush, now has a full plate in front of him, but the first order of business seems to be reaching out to Democrats.
That's right. In fact, President-elect Bush is meeting today with Democratic Louisiana Senator John Breaux. While the Bush camp says they will cover a wide range of issues, there's speculation that he might be offered a cabinet position. Of course, such a move would have a domino effect, disrupting the 50-50 Democratic-Republican split in the Senate. If Senator Breaux, or another Democratic senator for that matter, could be peeled away to serve in the cabinet, it might smooth the Republicans' way on Capitol Hill. We'll ask Senator John McCain about all of this in just a few minutes. Matt?
Katie, meanwhile, in the wake of a bitter and extended election battle, the president-elect fielded congratulatory calls from world leaders. He also got a call from Reverend Jesse Jackson, who told us just 2 days ago that he'd never consider Bush a legitimate president. We'll ask him if his opinion on that has changed.
We've got lots of other things to get to this morning as well. For example, how safe are those ubiquitous cell phones?
Everybody's using them. Scott Hamilton, the skater, and the best books for videos, and best books and videos for your kids as well.
That's right. But first, let's get started over the news desk with Ann Curry. Ann, good morning.
Good morning to you, Katie and Matt. Good morning, everybody. As you just heard, President-elect George W. Bush meets with a key Democrat today as he moves forward now on his cabinet appointments, and he may be ready to begin naming more names very soon. NBC's David Gregory joins us now with more on this from Austin, Texas this morning. David, good morning.
Good morning to you, Ann. The thrill of victory perhaps beginning to fade now. President-elect Bush and his team are now eyeing the clock. With more than half the transition time now gone, Bush and his aides are scrambling to fill the cabinet and make all the other necessary preparations to lead. Bush's intensive effort to mend fences with Democrats now well underway. Today, the president-elect meets here in Austin with prominent Democratic Senator John Breaux. Unlikely to join Bush's cabinet, Breaux does share Bush's views on Medicare reform, specifically prescription drug benefits for seniors, and could be a valuable Bush ally on Capitol Hill.
You've given us the authority and the right to command blessings upon them.
Bush spent his first day as president-elect attending church services and, back at the mansion, fielding congratulatory phone calls from foreign heads of state. More conversations with congressional leaders from both parties, and Bush even got a call from Jesse Jackson, aides saying the men talked about reforming an election system that some allege disenfranchised many African-American voters. Back in Washington, where Bush will meet separately with Al Gore and President Clinton next Tuesday, the first tangible sign of federal help for the new administration.
It's a smart card.
The government hands over $5.3 million and the key card to government transition offices. Vice President-elect Cheney, who says the FBI has agreed to expedite background checks for cabinet appointees and support staff, will not reveal the timing of Bush's announcements.
We are going to do everything we can to get everybody named as quickly as possible, but I don't want to establish an artificial deadline.
Sources say Bush is poised to name senior White House staff, including his communications director, Karen Hughes, political strategist Karl Rove, and national security advisor Condoleezza Rice. His cabinet choices being narrowed down too. Colin Powell expected to be named Secretary of State first, and several names still being floated for Defense Secretary, including Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge and former Indiana Senator Dan Coats. Campaign chairman and close friend Don Evans is expected to be named Commerce Secretary. Bush, now the president-elect, is also receiving stepped-up Secret Service protection, including this new limousine delivered to the front door of the governor's mansion. Aides say that President-elect Bush has settled in his mind on several cabinet positions, certainly going to be a topic of discussion during meetings over the weekend here in Austin and at his ranch in Crawford, Texas. That's before Bush heads to Washington, D.C. late Sunday for his first round of meetings there on Monday. Ann?
NBC's David Gregory. David, thank you this morning. Well, President Clinton says his fellow Democrats will give President-elect Bush a honeymoon. The president made his comments last night as he and his family returned from a trip to Ireland and England. Mr. Clinton said the president-elect should be given a chance to, in his words, get his feet on the ground. American Edmund Pope spoke publicly today about what he called his horrible nightmare in Russia. Pope was convicted of espionage in Russia, then was pardoned on Thursday. He met this morning with reporters at a U.S. military hospital in Germany and thanked the American people, John Peterson, the congressman, and his wife.
The people of America, the freedom of the press has been very important, which is not something that you will experience in Russia today. But the freedom of the press, the attention this has had, Congressman Peterson's work, and Sherry and her efforts, I knew she was very capable, but she's done miracles to set me free. I am not a spy. There was no secret material involved. What I'm concerned about is any persecution of any of the Russians that may have been involved in this. If they're persecuted, it will also be a crime committed against those private citizens.
Pope said that he and his wife hope to return to the U.S. in a few days. Shares of Microsoft were down more than 6% during the night in after-hours trading. Thursday, the software giant warned that profits will be lower than first expected because of a worldwide slowdown in computer sales. The biggest media merger in U.S. history is closer now to being a done deal. On Thursday, the Federal Trade Commission approved the $111 billion merger between America Online and Time Warner. The deal still has to be approved by the Federal Communications Commission. Today, the former Soviet Republic of Ukraine pulled the plug on the infamous Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster. This morning, the plant's only working reactor was shut down for good. The reactor is located in the same building as the one that exploded in 1986. And boxing great Muhammad Ali will be making another major appearance at another major event. He has been picked to help ring in the year 2001 by lowering the ball in New York's Times Square on New Year's Eve. And that is good news. It is 7:07. Let's turn back to Matt, Katie. Now, I can't think of anybody else I'd want to start the new year with.
No, that's nice, Anna.
It is nice. And
Thanks
you'll be down
very
there partying. Right?
As always, stuck in the middle of the 100,000, what is it, 1 million people?
Something like that.
Just my kind of scene.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Al.
We've got another big storm to talk about for the Midwest. Yeah, unfortunately, let's take a look.